Hi.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll and on with the show. Hello, everybody. This is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. And as always, I've got Darren Jolly across the table from me.
Hello. I'm from nowhere.
I was listening to an episode of the podcast earlier, and I am making no guarantees, but I noticed that I'm doing the podcast kind of like I speak, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but about every fourth word is fuck. So I'm going to try to make an effort to cut back on the word fuck, and make it, I don't know, every seventh word or something, just to make it not as often, because we kind of try to, I don't know, we're not necessarily following a path, but all of the things that we talk about kind of have something to do with something that we want to talk about or vice versa. So we were talking about protection of thyself or a third party. So this episode we're going to talk about Amendment 2 and gun control. You know, do you think they're good? Do you think they're bad? Do you believe the fucking hype that the media says and that, you know, we need to get rid of guns? Are you one of the fucking retards that believes that we should only get rid of specific guns? You know, anyway, we're going to talk about guns. So, you got any clever, insightful opening thoughts, Darren?
Clever, insightful. I always have clever and insightful opening thoughts. You know, just one of the things, like I said to you earlier, that I really found interesting was how little had been done in terms of Supreme Court rulings with regards to the Second Amendment, particularly in the last 130 years. I mean, in the last 130 years, there was a case in 1939 that had, I mean, it had more to do with like sawed-off shotguns and stuff like that. I mean, it seemed more like it was, you know, the Chicago and what was going on with bootlegging and stuff. And then not until 2008 when all this sort of rhetorical discussions have come out about the militia concept came back out. So, like, just really quickly, Amendment 2, right? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? So, like, rooted in that idea, there hadn't been a lot of interpretations historically. And then when something came up in 2008, MSNBC and a bunch of these mainstream left-wing media outlets sort of seemed to drum up this position that there was these very clear interpretations, and the Supreme Court was laying out rules.
You know, it's funny because along those same lines, you and I were talking, and I don't know, maybe we have some older listeners that will be able to correct us one way or the other on this, but you know, when I was a kid, I don't remember Reagan or Carter arguing about guns or saying that these people are going to take away our guns or vice versa. I don't remember, and obviously I wasn't born yet, but I don't remember when, you know, learning about politics, them mentioning anything to do with, ironically enough, JFK saying something about guns, you know, or Nixon, or any of them. Lyndon Johnson. So when did the gun debate really come to the forefront? I mean, was it after Iran-Contra? Was it because of something specific? Because I think that argument happened before Ruby Ridge and before Oklahoma City, where it started to kind of, bubble up to the surface. But even back then, it wasn't where it is now, and now it's fucking asinine.
Well, the 70s definitely, I mean, at least from some of the stuff that I looked at, the NRA saw a giant shift in terms of what their intentions were. But it doesn't look to me like it just looked to me like gun companies wanted to drive the market. Like they saw a way to make money, and they wanted to kind of push that up. I mean, whether or not that's true, I don't really know. I mean, I was born in '76. My parents were trap shooters. When I was in Boy Scouts, because I was a Mormon in Boy Scouts before I went down the dark and beaten path that I ended up diverging when I met Brian when I was about 13. But I learned how to shoot when I was 12 years old. This was a very typical thing. I shot a handgun. I shot a rifle. I went trap shooting when my mom had me in her stomach. She was rated 6th in the country for female trap shooters. So gun culture was a part of my family's life in a very normal way. My family's from Eastern Colorado. I mean, hunting was sort of a normal thing. They had a lot of, they had sheep, they had cattle. I mean, that means that you have guns because you have to negotiate certain things when you have those kinds of animals. But politically, there's no doubt that now there are two very clear diverging paths with regards to, at least in terms of the mainstream media, if you're going to listen to Fox or if you're going to listen to MSNBC or CNN, where one of them basically suggests, like you said, there's a lot of discussions about what's the rifle that they all talk about, where the kid went in Uvalde and
AK-47, AR-15.
AR-15. Yeah. So people that identify themselves as Democrats, generally speaking, sort of seem to they come together and seem to sort of like congregate and agree that this is something that people don't need to have. A lot of people talk about that because they say it's not necessary for hunting. I mean, there are clearly some problems that maybe need to be negotiated, but I don't know if like picking a specific gun. I don't know. I mean,
I still, you mentioned gun companies trying to make sales, and I believe that a large portion of this fear that they're going to take away our guns is in order to sell more guns. Now, who is driving that? I don't think it's a specific gun company. But again, we talked about it in earlier episodes where, senators and reps will have a stock portfolio that may include, arms manufacturers. Now, is that why they're doing it? I don't know. I personally, now my mom was, I don't know if I would call her against guns, but she never really had a gun. My dad, before he split, bought her a gun and said, if you ever see anybody outside the house, shoot them and drag them inside the house. Which are wise words. But her brothers and her cousins, so my uncle and my second cousin, once removed or whatever, they all had guns and they hunted and we always had game meat around. So she definitely saw the benefits of hunters. Of course, my family wasn't hunting with, an AK-47 or an automatic rifle. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have them.
So, just statistically, real quick, just in relation to the business of guns. So, this is from an article out of Forbes, January 5th, 2022. Just the first paragraph. Top line: Americans bought about 19.9 million firearms last year, down 12.5% from 2020, according to one industry estimate. But 2021 was still the industry's second busiest year on record. Politics and public health continue to drive interest in owning guns. So, I mean, it's interesting that all this rhetorical disposition is sort of like bubbling up in the wake of having the two largest years of gun sales on record in the U.S.
Well, I've got to tell you, so I always knew kind of how I would act or how I've acted in the past. So I never bought a gun. But when COVID and the being trapped in the house thing and seeing everybody act like a bunch of fucking crazy people, it made me kind of think that I don't know who's going to come busting through my door. So I bought guns. I bought several guns. Also because of COVID and all of the shit that happened, I don't have those guns anymore. But I did have them. I don't know. I just think it's so weird because I tried to find some of the stuff that might show some of these older political campaigns arguing one way or the other, and I can't find it. And I'm trying to think what that trigger was. Again, Ruby Ridge, around that time they were talking about it. Waco, yeah, lots of crazy shit happened.
People got concerned because they saw certain things that the FBI was doing and certain things that clearly the FBI was covering up with regards to stuff. This is not politically loaded. It doesn't matter whether you're right or left. These are things that occurred. I mean,
yeah, but those are things that should have made us want guns for sale.
Well,
So you're saying that the Republicans saw the FBI doing their thing, and so then they had to quickly correct course in the eyes of the public?
I'm saying that when something occurs and things start to bubble up, that there's generally a response that goes to the other side. I mean, one thing that we both know, I'll never forget the day that Columbine happened. I was playing poker up in Colorado Central Station, and we knew, anybody that had half a brain knew what was gonna, on some level, what was gonna happen. You're gonna have a social discussion that arises where you're gonna blame the actions of Klebold and Harris on video games, on guns, on music, on their parents being horrible parents, any number of things that didn't really drive it. Maybe if there was something deeper, maybe if they did have other psychological issues that could have been negotiated or whatever, but there something precipitates. People that value the concept of having guns see the rhetorical disposition saying, maybe we don't need to have all these guns around. So then you start having people getting more guns, and then the other people on the other side of it saying, it becomes a dialogue in action ultimately at that point, where some people are doing it and other people are doing it on the other side.
Yeah. So I still, and I think that was at least part of the trigger, all of those things. And they saw certain results, so they just kept doing it because they see, okay, well, if we want a Republican-controlled House, then we have to blame, these people for this. And then a couple of years later, we need to switch it around, and they're just moving things back and forth. To maintain power and keep the blindfold over our eyes to where we can't see exactly what's going on. And I think that's the biggest thing that they can say is, we're taking away your guns. And then everybody freaks out and they focus on, well, they're trying to take away our guns. So they don't look at any of the other shit that's going on.
So you think the rhetorical disposition is just smoke and mirrors to get an individual to focus on the specific thing, but not focus on the bigger picture then?
I think at least in part.
I was listening to something earlier today about who was the goofy kid that went up to Wisconsin and shot those white kids.
Just recently?
Yeah. He was from Illinois.
Yeah, I don't know his name.
God damn it, I can't remember his name. Well, either way, that kid goes up there, and the weird people that I see. So like, I see these people that sort of like get galvanized around an ideological disposition that he supports, or other people like the Proud Boys support, or the 3%ers support, and all that shit, and they tend to support the idea of the Second Amendment and guns, but there's something that's incredibly hypocritical at the back of the way that because they're blue liners at the same time. How can you be in favor of having guns so that you can keep a government in check, but you keep supporting, the militarization of the police? It just seems like those. Shouldn't those be too contrary? You would want to keep the state smaller. You would want to keep the militarization of the police force as something that would not occur. Well,
I think a lot of the people that want the guns are either current or former military or current or former police. And these are people that may or may not know the big picture themselves, right? So they just say, okay, well, I do, this blue line is important. You can't have my guns. So Jim Jeffries was the comedian I was thinking of when I said that he said this, and you said, no, nobody ever said that.
What did he say? Say what he said again.
Well, so basically he said that at the time of the Constitution, it was a single shot musket. And now, we're talking about AR-15s and automatic rifles. And he said, so you've got at least time to cool off with the musket. So you catch your wife, fucking the neighbor. Well, hold on a minute. And he grabs his musket and he's loading it. And he's like, yeah, you're going to get it. I'm going to get you. And then he's like, oh, you know what? You're an all right guy. You're an all right guy.
Get off my wife.
But there were lots of people in, not the media, but just using television or electronics as a medium that said something similar. Rosie O'Donnell said something like that. Jamie Foxx said something like that. And all of this is, between, again, in the late 90s to now, because Jim Jeffries didn't get big until, I think, 2006, 2007. So the argument has been made, and I don't think that that's a very good argument, but Jim Jeffries said something else really interesting. He said, so the minute that I start talking about this, the audience is going to split into two halves. And, 50% of you are going to agree with me, and the other 50% are going to be like, we're talking about my guns here. And out of that 50%, 10%, and of course, we're still dealing with the whole 100. He didn't break down the 50 again, but he said 10%, those are going to be the guys that are like, I don't give a fuck. Keep your hands off my guns. And I think that he's probably right. Like, they don't listen to an entire argument because they just, I don't know, believe so wholeheartedly in that Second Amendment that it doesn't matter what you say.
Yeah, I think that general tendency, I think, pretty much runs rampant through the vast majority of. I mean, I think that's where your smoke and mirrors stuff tends to work really well, regardless of whether you're talking about it on the, technological innovation, brings about, guns that we weren't prepared to deal with. Militias aren't the same thing now as that, what we're dealing with an entirely different situation, or people that are saying, pro guns. I mean, like there's a it's people's emotions get really heavily involved in a lot of these things when they're trying to negotiate the ins and outs of them.
Well, he compared us to Australia too. Like after the Port Arthur massacre in whatever 96, Australia got rid of their guns. And he said, so here's the difference, is that in 96, after Port Arthur, we said, okay, since there was this massacre and there have been like 9 of them before Port Arthur, we're going to go ahead and get rid of guns.
So Australia, they tightened up their...
And he said, Australia said, yeah, okay, fine, no more guns. Now, whether or not that's entirely true, he's a comedian.
Sure.
But he did say something, and it was funny and probably mostly true, is that he said the same argument happened in the United States, which it kind of did, because we had Columbine and then Sandy Hook and, all of these fucking massacres. And he said, okay, now they said, we're going to take away your guns. And somebody said, you're going to take away our fucking guns? What are you talking about? And it's, it kind of true. I mean, I agree. I don't think the gun is not the issue. And even though they say it over and over and over again, the truth is that it isn't guns that are killing people. It's wackadoos that are killing people.
So, I mean, like, instead of, making these, because ultimately, shit, when I was 15 years old, I was over at a kid's house and there was a guy that had a fucking Uzi and he said, I'll sell it to you for $1,000. I mean, I'm a white kid from fucking suburbia, I mean, if I can do that, then no matter what you do, make them illegal, black markets are going to continue to exist as well. With the wackadoos, I mean, there were signs with the Uvalde kid, I mean, leading up to him. He was very young, I mean, are there steps that we can take instead to where we're addressing questions without,
I think so, but I think certain things are going to fall through the cracks anyway, because we're talking about lots and lots of people, right? So I think what you're talking about is tightening it up more on, if you've got mental problems, you can't have a gun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what does that mean? That means if you've ever seen a shrink for one thing or another, then maybe they need to look deeper into your background, I would think. So we can grab those people that have been court ordered to see psychiatrists, or they've been in institutions of some sort. Those people, we can say, no, you can't have a gun.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the people that are just flat fucking crazy that have never ever seen anybody?
Well, your point is of course true. But I mean, we like on some level or another, you got to have a starting point.
Yeah.
What I mean? So and like I don't think that we're very socially intelligent when it comes to the concept of mental health to begin with in the first place.
No, we're not. And it's funny. I don't think that they really care about mental health, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, they got rid of most of the federal mental health stuff, which also ended up paying for a lot of the state stuff throughout the 70s and 80s. So all of those programs that were built to ensure, people were looked after so that something like that didn't happen, those programs are gone.
I have a buddy who does house visits, right? I mean, and it's for people that were institutionalized at some point in time or another, or were or are totally codependent on the government for pretty much their whole because they're incapable of working and whatnot. And in the last 2 or 3 years, she has literally gone from I think they've cut half of the people that work for her. So she literally had to triple her caseload up, which means that anybody that she's going and seeing. I mean, how capable are you going to be of going in and like even interacting with the person for long enough to where you could get sort of like an evaluative point and to really understand where they are. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no doubt. Like the material things that are being put into mental health have been. I mean, anything that has to do with the social welfare concepts when it comes to the state have been, with the rise of neoliberalism, have been disappearing for decades now.
Well, and I don't even think, I mean, of course they're going to call it that because, they want to say, oh, well, socialism is bad. But it's just taking care of our citizenry, in one way or another. Either we're doing both, which we're taking care of the mentally ill, which in turn takes care of those who are not mentally ill because they don't have to worry about going to a fucking mall and getting shot up, or we're not taking care of either. And I think that that's really kind of the case here. Because look, here's the thing. If I want to fuck somebody up, lots of people, you don't need a gun to do it. And I think that there are people that are aware of that. I mean, there had to have been psychos before the gun was invented, and granted, there wasn't a mall that you could go to, back in even the Industrial Revolution. But I mean,
they didn't have malls in Manchester in the 1840s. Let's go to the mall, buddy. Let's go get a slushie.
So there weren't.
My British accent really is very bad.
Actually, that was better than the last
Thanks,
one.
dude. I've been working on it, so in the shower.
So I don't even know, like.
But the gun is still a tool. I mean, it's an effective tool. Like if a person wants to fuck somebody up, like no matter what, like,
it's easier to do than with a knife.
Yeah,
for sure. But that was my point, is that if there were a psycho and they wanted to hurt people, there are other things out there that could do it.
Most people that do that kind of stuff, they're not like Jack the Ripper. They're not artists, They're not like, I mean, I'm not identifying Jack the Ripper as an artist. I'm saying that like a person that like Hannibal Lecter imagines fucking doing things in some sort of like a peculiar way that, endears, like Dexter or something like that.
Right, right. Well, I was just making the point, because again, it's not guns that kill people, it's the people with the gun that are killing people.
So if you're in a society that essentially doesn't care about the social well-being of the population, and you're feeding guns into that population because the gun industry, sees this incredibly lucrative capability. I mean, this, like, I am, in terms of my appeal to emotion with regards to the history of the United States, like I always will kind of be like into the idea of the Second Amendment, but the what we're constructing right now is becoming more and more of a recipe for disaster than you hope that things don't take a turn, but it just seems like they could stockpile forever and just sit there. I mean, they could just get rust. I mean, I guess that could happen. That Kyle Rittenhouse guy, I really went down that today. I mean, like the way that he played out what he did was almost like a fantasy thing, and the dude did not get. You can get charged with anything. I mean, it was a jury trial, and that's the way that shit works, you know. But they ultimately ruled that his actions were self-defense, and like kind of what we're talking about in the last episode, because reasonable is like a very peculiar term. It depends on, it's rooted in very subjective interpretations, and there is no real, like, as much as we want to have a concrete belief that law has like some really concrete definitions. Sometimes, like, you look at that motherfucker, and I have no idea how they called that self-defense.
And what's sad is that what is reasonable to one person may not be reasonable to another. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, shit. We've known each other forever. We argue like motherfuckers and we will until the end of time.
Probably. And so I don't know. I mean, if let's say there were some sort of outside show and guns were banned, there were no guns at all, and everybody's laying out on their fucking picnic cloths or whatever, all you'd have to do is run a car through the park, and I'm sure you could take out a whole bunch of people. Do you think if that happened, they would ban cars?
I don't know that's a perfect
It's not a perfect analogy, but what I'm saying is if they got rid of guns and there are no more guns, mm-hmm. and somebody ran over 100 fucking people.
No, they're not going to get rid of cars because cars are still functional for transportation. That's why I mean, like, but like if you say the same thing and you're doing it like where a person has like this incredible like say like a dart shooting device where they can then you're right. Yes, there's an infinite regrets problem that comes out of this where a person creates another device that can do the same thing. And you just sort of like the obviously the only solution in these instances is to create a safe society, a society that's intelligent enough to make choices to where you don't have people that are going around fucking killing each other.
Actually, I think. Well, never mind. I was gonna say if psychos continue to cull the herd, then there's a high probability that they're killing other psychos. So.
Certain that won't have any effect on anything. That'll be Nancy Pelosi will be sitting there with fucking Chuck Schumer and fucking some Republican.
Yeah. Whoever.
Yeah, they'll be they're culling the herd. So it's a couple 6 of the people are good people, but 2 of the people were evil motherfuckers. So we're getting rid of some bad with the
Right. You gotta take the good with the bad. There was something that I really wanted to talk about, and now I completely fucking lost it.
Was it from like current times, or was it about the letter of the law and the Constitution to begin with, or?
No, I think it was just about guns in general. And I don't know. Oh, no, I know what I wanted to say. And this is kind of about guns, but just more about the government pulling its nose out of everybody's fucking business. So, a policeman should try to protect the public. But what that means is if you see a guy with a gun, breaking into a house, stop that person because he's doing something illegal at that point. If you see a guy cocking a shotgun walking into a bank, stop that person. He's probably doing something wrong. But if you just see someone with a gun in their house, let him be, because he's probably not doing anything wrong. Until he does something wrong, leave him alone. And I know that the argument is going to be, well, that's part of the problem, and that's why, people at malls and wherever are getting killed, so we've got to get rid of the guns. But clearly, that isn't working, and I know everybody makes this argument too, but you mentioned, when you're a teenager, somebody trying to sell you an Uzi for $1,000. Right now, fentanyl is illegal, and so is heroin, but any fucking high school kid can go and get heroin or fentanyl, right? I'm pretty sure they can go and get guns. I would prefer to have it where I'm allowed to have a gun and certain people aren't, as opposed to nobody's allowed to have them, but certain people who don't give a shit are going to have them anyway.
So can you elaborate on the part about
not being allowed to so
have them? So you mean people that are mentally...
People that are going to break the law, period. So if they don't care because of some sort of mental problems or the fact that they want to rob a bank and don't give a fuck about, robbing a bank being illegal, let alone possessing a firearm, those people are going to buy a gun anyway. And so now they're still going to have guns. So I don't think we're going to eliminate the problem. Yeah. Now it's illegal for them to buy a gun and shoot up a high school or a mall, but they don't care.
I mean, I don't think that you're really running any concern. Nobody's going to round up any guns right now. Like, to be perfectly honest with you, what I'm much more scared about is the other point that I brought up, dude, was all of these people who talk about small government pushing huge amounts of military expenditures into the air. I mean, like it just reminds me of that stuff in William R. Robinson's global military state or global military war, whatever that book is called. I can't remember what it's called, but it just seems almost like it almost looks like you saw like ways that they made money off of selling guns in the Congo. I have a horrible fear that these financial positions are feeding a potential for conflict into some, it's a rearguard strategy into the U.S., I mean.
But it's not just the U.S., and it's funny because I don't know why. Maybe it was because of just the Bill of Rights as a whole, but when we started talking about doing this episode, I got this flashback of a picture that I saw when, I think it was when the Olympics were in London, but they had strapped fucking like missile launchers to some dude's house. It was just a private house. And, there were several of them, and they had put these huge fucking missile launchers.
Who
I don't know, whoever,
somebody
like MI5 or MI6 or whatever. I don't know.
London Intelligence.
The SAS, some government entity, had put these launchers on top of people's houses and like sniper towers and shit. And here, because of the Bill of Rights, you can't do that shit anymore. Because of the no quarter. What is that? Amendment 5? Whatever.
Yeah.
So doesn't have jack shit to do with guns, but for some reason when we were talking about doing this, oh yeah, because 5 is, I played the 5th. That picture just hit me, and I don't know. I'm not sure why, but I thought it was kind of funny.
The state using somebody's space like that weirds me out less than the thought of like some of the pictures that were like when that protest broke out in Wisconsin. So like I can't remember the guy's name, but a black guy got shot by the cops 14 times. He didn't end up dying, but he ended up being paralyzed as a result of it. I mean, it was excessive force. It was a pretty shitty thing. But when it happened, all of these people fled into Wisconsin, and there was these rhetorical like dispositions, like the Rittenhouse kid saying, "I'm going to go in there and protect property." Well, if a person decides to go and do that, there's a word for that. It's a vigilante, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand under what circumstances it ever makes sense to where. So like in the instance where after he had shot the second, so he killed 2 and he injured the last one. He shoots 3 people. The cops just go right by him. They don't even. I mean, how does like what? Like that's the picture that I'm getting in my head in the future. Like where like I mean, it's not like Palestine, but it's like where law would be even more subjective than it already is, and where these people would exact.
Well, it's kind of like that. What the political arm of the IRA is Sinn Féin, right? And then there's the IRA, which is actually the guns and stuff. So if we were in Ireland, and then you know the Sinn Féin guys are really running everything, but the IRA is arming everyone, you know, neighbors and whatever else. So maybe in a place like that, and this is an example, I'm not saying it would ever happen or has happened, but you know, they're running the government in theory. And so they've got the police, but then they just run right by the IRA guys. And don't do anything about it. And you could say that for a couple of organizations, I think, where something like that could happen.
Yeah, it would all. I mean, it would all be locally specific, like who's got power here, and,
right?
And where the money's tied, and I mean, this fantasy of whatever it is that we have now would be a thing of the past. I mean, that would be a tragedy, you know. But like if we keep, I don't know. I'm not going to tell anybody to take guns away, but I just think that the psychology of our current social existence is not lending itself to a pretty good outcomes. I don't think.
So my closing thoughts are not going to be as academic as Darren, which they never are, but I still think the government should keep their nose out of my fucking business until I do something wrong. So I think that, you know, I should be able to own 3 pit bulls and a dragon, and I should have a fistful of cocaine in one hand and a big fucking AR-15 in the other, and I should be going 95 miles an hour in my car. And until I do something wrong, the police should leave me the fuck alone.
You look like Chevy Chase there, you know,
driving with my knees. Yeah. I know I probably stretched it a little bit, but you guys get the point, I think. Anyway, those are my closing thoughts. I really, you know, even though I'm not a gun owner to the fact that I've got, you know, 16 guns, I should have the right to have those 16 guns. And it's not to protect myself against some dipshit. It's to, try to protect myself against a bunch of dipshits, the ones that we have elected into office. If they try to pull some shit down the road, a tyrannical, what is it? Tyrannical government is what I want to protect myself from. Not that I'm going to do that now, even though we could call it tyrannical now. Thank you for your thoughts.
We'll just use our voices as weapons in the meantime. I'm just more concerned about the political economy of it, which is obviously going to be what I'm going to say 99.9% of the time. So what are we talking about next Monday?
So I think we got homelessness coming up. We've got monsters on Wednesday, and then I think the Friday episode is still kind of up for debate.
Yeah, we'll see where we go for that. The monsters thing will be about like the evolving, the way they've changed in terms of function with regards to the mythology, like in movies and stuff and whatnot. It'll be fun.
It'll be a good time, as all of our episodes are.
And homelessness will be a bucket of joy as well, because heaven knows that that's what brings joy to people's lives.
Indeed, homelessness is fun. All right, so you guys know the deal. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays are new episodes. Twitter, Short Bus Debate. TikTok, Short Bus Debate Club.
720-334.
Roll. You gonna sing your song?
No. I actually am working it out on the. I'm working it out on the uke, so I'm gonna graft a little fish on that. So.
All right, bitches. We'll see you next week.
Later.